Why did you go back to being a solicitor for a while?
I married John Smithers' daughter, elder of two, at a time when the eldest of the three of them, of his children, had died, and John, wanted him to come into the practice. He wasn't a particularly good student, but that's not to the point. He died. He had a cerebral hemorrhage. In his late 20s, I, at that time, was taking duty out, and John came to me one day when I said, this hard work and there's this and that, and he said, I want to talk to you. So he told me then of the plan that he and Raymond Tobias had to merge Liebman and Tobias with Smithers, Warren and Lyons. Now, of course, it's grown into one of the biggest firms in Sydney. And in that way, he induced me to come back as a full partner, but in charge of the litigation section. How could I resist that? With a team under me, I did some advocacy, but it was a great chance to set up in a burgeoning firm an advocacy section.
Oh, that is interesting. Yes, I mean, I assumed you had a very solid reason for it, but...
Well, there was a reason. Oh, it was lovely to... I wasn't struggling at the bar, of course. I was doing so much work I couldn't scratch myself. But the relief from the hard work was good for my marriage, because by being a little bit more available on weekends, it helped it very much indeed. But the beauty of it was John Smithers and Raymond Tobias were two of the most astute lawyers I've ever known, both very goodness men too, and they coming together with great knowledge of what makes a practice tick helped all of us, and it grew and grew and grew, commercially and in the liquor work and so forth. It was a very, very big practice, and I had a full go with the the litigation, except Ken Austin, who was a partner too. He had smaller commercial work in litigation, but I was the one who did it all. And I've got some article clerks who are now Queen's Counsel.
It's interesting. You, over the years, extended into what could only be described as a very broad practice. But these days people are more specialists. Is that a bad thing or a good thing?
Well, you can look at through glasses that are rosy if you like. I've always thought that if you're not an all-rounder, you're not going to be the greatest success. But on the other hand, where they went and had to wash their hands to get into equity, those people stuck to it and got commercial work. Everybody seemed to specialise. But there were many, like the gentleman you were mentioning a little earlier, all-rounders. They could do anything.
And is the law poorer for the comparative lack of them now?
Yes, I think so. They were brilliant people. They could do all sorts of things. I won't go into mentioning names, but specialism in the greatest detail came later. But in those days, particularly post-war and even beyond that, you had to be an all-rounder. I mean, take Tom Hughes. He could go anywhere and speak in the Privy Council. There were lots of advocates like that.
Of course, there's so many more people at the bar now. When Tom, I was interviewing him last week, came back to the bar after the war, there was only a few hundred at the bar, and now, of course, there are thousands.
Yes, that's true, and they lose their identity. We didn't lose our identity, particularly those to whom we looked up and said, want to follow you. And I had the privilege to be on the same floor, as I told you earlier, in Wardell Chambers with Tom. He was just such a good leader and a good person. Now, there are lots of people like that.
Of course, your father was, as you mentioned earlier, very influential for you, and you've spoken highly of some others. Are there other people at the time or during your years of practice who were strongly influential for you, either as a lawyer or perhaps more in a philosophical sense?
Oh, I suppose there were, but I really can't remember names. I looked up to many people. I mean, Victor Maxwell, as I say, he's a bit of a larrikin at the bar, but he made a wonderful judge. And indeed, I think the people who were tending to be larrikin did well because they had worldly experience. They were erudite as well. But more importantly, they had a general knowledge of the law which helped them to find the law. They would go to where their instinct led them and find the law they wanted because they knew where to go and not spend hours reading books.
When you went back to being a solicitor, and this is something I've longed to ask because I haven't actually interviewed too many barristers who've also spent extensive amounts of time as a solicitor, It's often said that barristers are not necessarily good team players. Being a solicitor would have, I thought, given you an excellent experience as well of being a team player and knowing, if you like, both sides.
Yes, you have to be a team, because if you sit round a boardroom with 12 people and don't follow the team spirit, you get yourself nowhere. And indeed that led sometimes when Smithers Warren became a very big firm as it is now called DVD, and it's taken over by a Melbourne firm. They're very big time. You really had to have a rehearsal of what you were going for and find out where your friends were, where your enemies were. And that's the way these big firms work. Sometimes I worry because they've grown bigger than that now. They have floor after floor in these big buildings. Their turnover must be bewildering. And they have practices in Hong Kong and London. That's beyond me. I was at the stage where from a little practice, two little practices got together and burgeoned into something over the years. That was fascinating and tough work. I remember, though, I had a client who we won an equity suit with Murray Tobias as the counsel I chose. And I didn't ever send him a bill on the way through, and they were all worried about this. I said, he'll be right. And anyhow, he came in and he said, I've got your bill. Look, here it is. And he put wads of cash on the table. So I went to my partners and I said, what do I do with this? Giving a wink of the eye. Oh, no, put it in the trust account. You wouldn't have done that in a police court practice like Adrian had.
I would imagine not.